Welcome to the KYC Podcast, the official podcast of Cable and Connections, your trusted low-voltage distributor since 1997. And today, we have the man, the myth, the legend himself, Chuck Bowser, Mr. RCDD. Thank you for hopping on today. How are you?
The man, the myth, the legend.
Yeah.
You're exaggerating way too much.
A man of your stature in the industry has become a legend, almost a myth. You know, in a few years you may become a myth, but right now you're a legend. So,
there you go. So hey, I gotta ask you a question. What's KYC mean?
Keeping you connected.
Oh, very cool. Very cool.
It's been our slogan since 2012, I want to say. Before that, it was your Southern Connection.
Okay.
And then we kind of grew outside of South Carolina, and now we're a national brand. So we rebranded back in 2012, and the slogan became "Keeping You Connected." So we wanted to kind of mesh the two brands together.
Yeah.
So
it's kind of weird being on this side of the river stream. I'm used to being on the other side, hitting the record button, and doing all this.
Right.
And I got to forewarn you. I got a couple cable dogs laying on the ground right here behind me, so they may bark or you may hear them clickety clack or ruffle. But I got the cable dogs backing me up.
Okay. Well, I'll make sure not to upset you too much. I don't want them coming after me. Now, I know you've had your podcast for a while, but for people that don't know who you are, just give a quick introduction to yourself and your podcast.
Absolutely. My name is Chuck Bowser, your favorite RCDD, Bixie technician, former certified trainer. I run a small little podcast called Let's Talk Cabling. It's coming up on 5 years old.
Now, when you say small, I believe you just got the #1 cabling podcast.
I did.
So I don't know about small, but you've made a little bit of a name for yourself in the industry. Continue. Sorry to interrupt. Continue.
That's the humbleness in me, right?
Right.
So and I've always been that way. I used to be a volunteer firefighter many years ago.
Okay.
And in the fire department world, I work for an engine company, and they're an engine company. You got those two guys who drag the hose in to put out the building fire, right? Right. Well, one's called the knob man, the other's called the backup man. Right, the knob man's the guy who's actually pulling the thing to spray the water.
Right.
And I always told my captain, I don't want to be the knob man. I want to be the guy behind. Everybody wanted to be the knob man. They wanted to have their picture putting on the newspaper, hero firefighter. No. I'm here to do a job. I don't care about that. But so I'm very humble, and that's why I said yes. I put that out there, not for my acclamation, but I put that out there because I'm trying to attract sponsors for the podcast.
Right.
That's why I put that out there. I don't put it out there and say, hey, look at me. I'm like, hey, the podcast is reaching. It's #1. You might want to advertise on the podcast. So that's why I do that.
Right. Well, I may end up giving you a run for your money with our new podcast here in a little bit. Have some competition in the industry now.
Well, hold on. You got to get the RCDD first before you give me a run for the money.
That's right. You're right.
I mean, I look at when I learned that you guys are starting to do podcasts, I don't view you guys as competition. We're complementary to each other.
That's right.
So
we mesh.
I mean, exactly right. So we're complementary to each other. So a rising tide lifts all boats. So I'm there to help you. So yeah, the podcast, like you said, was rated #1 podcast. I think each month, it depends on the month. This month's gonna be really good because of the Bixie conference. But I range usually between 125 and 225,000 views a month.
Nice. Okay.
This because of Bixie, I hit like 52,000 views just for that week alone because of Bixie, because of the conference and stuff. So this month's gonna be real. I got the numbers. I just got to put them in the graph and publish it out. But it's gonna be a really good month. So I am making waves, and the whole reason for the podcast, the 3 pillars: educate, encourage, and enrich the lives of people in the ICT industry. I was just talking to Sean Kelly right before with my podcast, interviewing him right before you got on. We were talking about the gray tsunami, and for every 5 people who retire, there's only 1 person to step in that person's place to replace those 5 people, and that's creating a huge shortage. He said a number during that podcast just floored me because of the broadband initiative. There's somewhere between a deficit of 200,000 to 800,000 fiber optic technicians right now.
That's crazy.
Yep.
There's a big boom in fiber optics right now too. So there's not enough people to meet the demand in the industry.
Absolutely.
Well, hopefully we can change that. So educate and enrich the lives of the people listening right now.
Educate, encourage, and in case you forget, it's back here. educate, encourage, and enrich
All
the
righty.
lives of
All
people in
righty.
Michigan. It's also on my stickers too. My stickers. I've got some floating around here somewhere.
Right. Now, I know you said that's your mission behind your podcast, but what made you want to start your podcast?
You know, it's kind of, well, it's so the 2020 Big C conference. It was in Tampa. It was right before COVID hit.
Mm-hmm.
And I go to all the committee meetings when I go to the Big C conferences because I want to know what's coming down the pipe, right? Because I got to deal with it for design or estimation or even teaching students because my day job I teach students. And so I was in the codes and standards committee meeting, and I'm not a member there. I'm just you can go there and attend them if you're not a committee member. And the guy got up and he said, "Look, hey, look around the room." I'm like, "Yeah, okay, what?" He goes, "There's a bunch of old people in this room. There's no young people." He says, "If we don't do something about that, this industry is going to suffer." I'm like, "Dude, he's right." But I'm thinking, what the heck could I do? I'm just at the time I was just a trainer for a manufacturer. And what could I do? But I have experience and training in doing video and photography. And I've had other podcasts in the past, and other vlogs out there in the past. I've got experience on how to create a vlog and put it all together. I was like, you know what? I've been putting it off, so I'm going to do one about cabling. I'm going to start trying to get information out there to the people coming into the industry, make their journey a little bit easier than mine was. I'd rather you learn a lesson from one of my mistakes than you making that same mistake again.
Right.
And that's the whole premise behind the podcast.
Okay. Well, that gives me a little insight into how your brain was working before you came up with this.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not just a podcaster though. So in your normal day-to-day life, you travel and you're teaching people. So how do you level out being able to travel and teach people and running your farm and doing this podcast? I feel like you're always busy. You never have time to just sit back and relax. So how do you balance all those things?
Who says I have it balanced? That's the first question. Who says I have it balanced, right?
Yeah.
It seems to me like it comes in ebbs and flows, right?
Right.
So the day job, that always ranks number one because that pays the bills, right? That
Right.
always ranks. And luckily, my day job is kind of shifted from face-to-face trainings to virtual training. So I'm doing more virtual than I do face-to-face now. That helps me a lot because now I can do the podcast stuff typically either on my lunch break or after hours. And then so when you put the farm on top of that, the farm, it sounds like a lot of work, and certain times of the year it is a lot of work.
Right.
Like right now, springtime. We got baby chicks on the farm, and spring is all the new stuff, and that's where you do all your building. So it is time. I got a 20-year chicken coop that I'm still working on. I call it the 20-year chicken coop because it's supposed to last 20 years. But I told my wife just the other day, I'm changing the meaning. She goes, "What do you mean?" It says, "It feels like it's taking me 20 years to build this thing."
I was getting ready to say it went from lasting 20 years to taking me 20 years.
yeah, because it's made out of pressure treated 4x4s, 2x4s, and the thing is 8 feet wide by 16 feet long. It looks like a shed. It's built out like a house. And once I get that done, then the farm activities will kind of draw as we hit the summer. It'll kind of go into maintenance mode where you just kind of take feeding and watering the animals. Morning chores take me 20 minutes. Afternoon, 20 40 minutes, stuff like that. It ebbs and flows. So sometimes one might be busier than the other, and then sometimes when all three are busy, I'm busier than a one-legged man in a butt kicking contest.
Okay, so besides being as busy as you are, what year did you get started in the low voltage industry? What was that?
1982. 1982. Probably before most people who are listening to this podcast were born, except for maybe one person, and I know who he is.
Is that yourself?
No. Somebody who works with you.
Oh, okay.
Who probably listens to this show.
Okay.
But yeah, 1982. I started off as like everybody else. It's funny. Most people in this industry fall into this industry, right?
Okay.
Vast majority, because I don't remember any kid saying when I was growing up, "I want to be a cable guy when I graduate high school."
Right.
No, you kind of fall into it most of the time, and that's kind of how I did. I was working for a company that was going out of business, and my wife at the time, she's my ex-wife now, but my wife at the time, her friend worked for a guy that did cabling, and they said, "Hey, we got positions." So I just went and applied, and boom, I was off like Donkey Kong, man. Just and the funny thing is, the industry's changed a ton, just from then to now. And when you think about it, it sounds like a lot. 82 to now, that's what 42 and a half years of experience. That might sound like a lot of years, and granted it is, but the industry, how much the industry's changed has been tenfold since I first got in this industry.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question is how have you seen the industry change from 1982 to now, just from Cat 3 to Cat 5, the
We didn't have
evolution
Cat
of
3 back when I started.
Right.
There was no Cat 3. And it's funny because, being a professional podcast host, didn't you like how I leaded you into that question?
Yeah.
Wasn't that pretty cool?
Yeah.
Pretty slick? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what happens when you have 300 episodes under your belt. You learn how to do this stuff sooner or later.
Right. And the notes beforehand really come in handy to kind of lead us into the next category. So.
But I don't have them up in front of me, though. I don't have them up in front of me. I've got them buried. I'm like, I'm going to shoot from the hip like I always do.
Okay.
I always do better when I shoot from the hip. But yeah, to answer your question, when I first got in this industry, basically you had companies that did computer cabling, and you had Ma Bell doing the telephone. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I was working for a computer cabling company. So we were putting in cabling for different types of IBM systems, Wang systems. We were putting in proprietary type of cable plants. So for example, IBM, you could be putting in twin-ax. You could be putting in type 1, type 3, type 9. For Wang systems, you're putting in dual RG59 coax, right? So that we had every computer system had its own type of proprietary cable plant. And then when divestiture happened, the market opened up for people doing telephony work. So then you started finding companies kind of coming together and doing both voice and data. Now this is back when we're doing POTS cabling. This is even before Cat 3. Cat 3, right? And so then they started doing both. And then the whole industry kind of looked at that and said, this is kind of stupid because we got telephone cable over here. It works whether you've got an analog phone line or a Roam phone system or a Panasonic KSU. It doesn't matter what kind of system works. They all use the same type of cabling. And then they looked at the computer cabling industry and said, this is stupid because if a customer wants to change from an IBM system to a Wang system, not only do they have to change the computers, they got to change all the cabling. So the industry said, hey, let's fix this. And that's how kind of computers kind of got merged together with telephony. And now we put in balanced twisted pair cabling or some type of fiber, and it works for every type of system. And then came along the category rated systems, Cat 3, Cat 4, Cat 5, Cat 5e, Cat 6. Depending you're talking about the ANSI or the ISO standards, Cat 7, Cat 7a, and then Cat 8. And so it's always, the thing I love about this industry, Theron, is it is always changing.
Right.
It's a challenge to stay current with it. And I love that because the worst thing you could do is bore me. I hate to be bored.
Right.
So this industry's always changed. It literally changes. Here's a colloquialism for you. It changes at the speed of light. The speed of light. Because what we do, I bet you if you ask your audience members who all's terminated a twin-ax connector, you'll hear crickets. Crickets.
Right. And it's very rare that we get asked for twin-ax cable nowadays. Like people still say, do you guys sell twin-ax? So it's not very common. I think I've worked here for 10 years, and I think it's come up 3 times in the last 10 years.
And that used to be all the rage. That used to be the Cat 8. That used to be the Cat 8, right? And there's still systems out there using some of those older types of cable plant, but by far, you look at the industry, how it's shifting, it's changed over. And I think it's a good thing because now you have what's called interoperability. Interoperability, which is a big fancy word, which means that cable works with everything. And if you do it correctly, if you follow the standards, you don't exceed the 295 feet, and you start off with Cat 5e, if you're a technician out in the field listening to this or a business owner listening to this, you know that cable plant's going to work with 99 and 44/100% of every computer system out there. That's how this industry's changed in the last 42 and a half years.
Yeah, it's amazing to get insight from someone like yourself that's been in the industry so long. And I'm trying to remember the first time we met. I believe you told me a story about how Type A and Type B termination came about for category cable.
T568A and T568B?
Yeah, so share with our listeners the story of that?
So the T568B, the most commonly used wiring scheme in the United States. Get outside the U.S., you'll find that it's different, but
And
in
I
the
think it's
U.S.,
the U.S. always has to be different with our measuring systems,
it
with
does.
everything. We always have to be
It
different than
does.
everybody else.
It absolutely does. So the 568B wiring scheme, you can trace its roots back to an older wiring scheme called 258A, and that was invented by Ma Bell, and it was used for their phone systems. And when Ma Bell came out with their Merlin phone system, most phone systems before the Merlin phone systems used one or two pairs.
Right.
When they went to the Merlin phone system, it needed all four pair to work. So what AT&T did at the time was they got a patent on that wiring scheme. Okay. Well, there's another telephony manufacturer called Nortel, which sells phones. They're based out of Canada. They wanted to start selling in the United States. They couldn't duplicate the 568B wiring scheme. So how'd they get around the patent? They flipped two pairs. And that's why we have an A and a B. They both perform equally well. I'll show you how much of a cabling geek I am. I took a piece of 100-foot cable one time. I terminated at A. I tested it. I cut the ends off, terminated at B, expecting one to form better than the other. They were nearly identical. They were almost identical.
Yeah, when I first started at Cable and Connections, I didn't know that there was a standard on termination. So when I would make cables, just playing around, getting used to the product that we would sell, I would just terminate it straight across. I wouldn't worry about the colors. I would just make
Oh,
sure it's terminated the exact same way on the other side.
right.
And one of my
You,
managers was like, what are you
you,
doing? He was like, you're supposed to follow the colors. And I was like, what are you talking about?
right.
I just thought it didn't matter what it was as long as it's the same on the other side.
That's actually that's one of the big. You want to start an argument on the internet. There's a few go-tos that you can do, say that will cause a fight on the internet, especially the low voltage people on the internet. And one of them is the color codes, right? And by the way, it's T568A, T568B. The T stands for termination, and there's a story behind that too. But I'll skip that for now. But and the reason they have an A and a B. Oh, darn it! I forgot where I was even going with that. Dang it, man. Oh, so ADHD, squirrel.
Right. I've been there.
Yeah, exactly. So the reason they came up with a wiring scheme, think about at the time, Ma Bell, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ma Bell had, I don't know, a bazillion employees. They had employees in Miami, they had employees in California, they had employees in Boston. They wanted everybody terminating the exact same way. So that way, if they had an issue, and this happened, my wife now, her father used to work for AT&T, and he did the cabling for the U.S. Olympics in Atlanta, and it had to do the stuff after the bomb went off as well too. So when that went off, they had to bring people in from all over the country to help bring that back up again. Well, if everybody's got their own wiring scheme in different parts of the country, that's not going to go very well. But if everybody's terminating the exact same way, whether you pull them from South Beach in Miami or Long Beach in California or New York City, they'll all terminate the exact same way. That's why we have that color code. That's where it all comes from. And you can't just terminate straight across any willy-nilly way you want, because you see what happens is when you look, connectors are 8 PAC, 8 position, 8 contact. So when you actually look at a connector, a diagram, you'll notice that pair 1 is pins 1 and 2 is one pair, pins 3 and 4 is a different pair, pairs 4 and 5 is a different color, and then 7 and 8 is a different color. So if you go straight across, you're going to be splitting pairs across transmission channels, right? So you can't just go straight across. And people try to say, well, the computer doesn't care what color it is. You're right, it doesn't. But it does care about where the transmit and receive come in. It does care about that. And that's where the problem lies, in fact. The key concept, the key thing to know, if you're listening to this show and you want to know what to do, just make sure you terminate either A on both sides or B on both sides. That's all that you need to know, right? And in the A wiring scheme, you will find some federal government agencies like to use A. There's some school districts that like using A. But again, because every time I teach a class, and I've taught 20,000 people over the last 12 years, I always ask them, which you use most, A or B? In every single class, it is almost overwhelmingly B.
Right. Well, we ran into an issue with A versus B at one of the TKW events, text giving, in one of the Philadelphia sites that we did. We had people come in from Canada. We had people come in from all over the U.S. So you had Canadians terminating Cat 6, doing A for cameras, and then some people from, the US terminating for cameras doing B. So they would terminate one in A, and then you have a guy from the US terminating the other in B. And the cameras aren't working. And we were like, we have Canadians on site. That explains it, because
that's it. Blame it on the Canadians.
That's their standard in Canada is A. So we were able to get that sorted out and re-terminate everything B. So
nice.
It worked out for everybody. But it was a learning experience, because we didn't even think about Canadian standard versus US standard. Right. It's just
it's not really the Canadian standard versus the US standard. It's the standard accepted both, and I get asked all the time, why do we still have both? It's the way the committees work, right? The standards committees. So the standard committees, they come together once every 5 years, and then they look at the industry, see what's changed, and they write new stuff and put it in. Well, the committee's full of volunteers. So you have volunteers who have background, with AT&T and committee members have experience with Nortel, and since they both perform equally well, that's why we still have both. That's why you'll never have just one or the other in the standards.
Okay. Now, what are some challenges that installers or contractors used to face back in the day that you don't really see much anymore?
Soldering connectors. That's it right there. I've burnt my fingertips more than once soldering on twin X connectors and coax connectors.
Yeah.
And in today's environment, I don't think anybody in low voltage, I don't say anybody, because there's a possibility there's somebody out there still soldering, but the vast majority of people are not soldering anymore. It's funny, because when I hear these things like these comments people make, like, oh, these people nowadays, they don't want to work, and we have these problems hiring new people. That's a tale as old as time. We had the same problem back in the 80s.
Right.
It's the same problem. It's the same thing. So realistically, the biggest change is you get to put away the soldering iron, and I don't have to worry about burning my fingertips anymore.
We actually have a guy in-house that is still soldering for us, custom cable assemblies, but he's more like the ham radio type of cables, like SMA and those type of connectors. But he still solders for us and does custom cable assemblies. So he's been a part of the company for 20 years now. So
wow,
yeah. But I was gonna say the opposite. Things that are in a standard in the industry today that you wish you would have had back in the 80s.
All of the standards, actually, because back when we were doing cabling, especially to somebody new in the industry. I mean, think of it this way, right? The way that you terminate a Category 5E cable is pretty much the same way you terminate a Category 6A cable.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's pretty much the same. But back in the 80s when we were doing cabling, well, you might have been doing, like I said, soldering pins on a twin X connector, but then you might have been using crimp connectors for the coax, right? Or don't even get me going about Type 1 connectors. Type 1 connectors is people don't realize Type 1 connector is actually good to 600 megahertz. So it's actually a really good cable, but the connector was the downfall. It was what they called a hermaphroditic connector. It was neither male nor female. With coax connectors, you need a male and a female to be able to plug them into each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
With a Type 1 connector, it was neither male nor female. And it was 22 gauge conductors, 4 conductors, and it was a pain to try to get that in there. So you had to learn all these different types of termination techniques and stuff. And, if everything would have been done, just, terminate, AP8Cs, that would have made my job so much easier. And the testers, don't get me going about testers. Today's environment, those testers take what? 10 seconds to do a test?
Right. Yeah.
When we were doing certifiers with the old testers, you'd hit the button, it'd go
like the old dial-up tones.
It did. And the tester would shake, and it took 45 seconds to a minute to test a cable. And you multiply that by the number of cables in a job, and it's a lot of time. So you young whippersnappers have it so much easier than we did. We had to walk uphill in the snow both ways to test our cable. I'm sorry, I'm on fire today. I don't know why.
You don't think about seconds in termination helping you on. Yeah.
Text don't think about that. You know who does? Estimators.
Yeah.
Yep.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as predictions for the future of this industry. Uh, do you see, 10, 15, 25 years from now, do you see us being completely copper free and everything going to fiber? Where do you see the industry heading?
Well, 15 years from now, 20 years from now, I hope to be retired and not even thinking about communications anymore. But
Hopefully, yeah.
But with that, it's funny. I probably will never retire because I love this industry and I love what I'm doing. So I'll probably do it until I drop dead.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, there's so much exciting stuff coming down the pikes, right? Single pair Ethernet, digital electricity. Today's an exciting time for somebody to get into this industry because there's so much cool stuff coming down the pike. And to answer your question about will copper go away, I think it will. I don't think it's going to be in 15 years, though. I think it's going to take longer. And the reason for that is because there's still viable reasons why copper is better than fiber, right? And there's reasons why fiber might be better than copper. Yeah, people used to say the same thing about Cat3 cable. Cat3 cable is going to be around forever. Where's it now?
Right.
Copper will go. I read an interesting article. There's a magazine out there. Here's a pro tip for your listeners. If you want to become better at this industry, look up and subscribe to Cable Installation and Maintenance Magazine. Okay, they put out a magazine out once every 2 months. They have updates on codes, standards, installation practices. My favorite section is the back because that's where the tools are. But they also do webinars, 2 webinars a month. And so it's a great way to stay current with the industry. And, the thing is, when you start to think about those technologies coming down the pike, the best way to stay up to date with them is to be a continuous learner. And they put out some of the best webinars out there that you can actually watch. And they don't cost you a thing.
Right.
Free training. How often do you hear those 2 words together? Free training.
Right. Not very often.
Yeah.
So that's definitely worth looking into.
Yep.
So what inspired you to pursue RCDD certification?
I was working with a guy that when he told me he got his RCDD, I'm like, that idiot got his? If he can get it, I can get it. Well, right. I quickly learned that it wasn't as easy as I thought it was going to. I remember when I got mine, it was on the 8th edition of the TDMM. We're now currently in the 15th edition. So it didn't have as many pages as the current one has. And I thought, okay, well, not a problem. I'll read through these 2 books and I'll take my test and off to go. I'll have my thing. And when I read through the book, I laughed through most of the book because I'm like, that's not how we do it in the field. Right. And then I realized that because it took me 2 attempts because I failed the first time because there's a lot of information in it. So the second time after I passed it, and then after I started really functioning as an RCDD, I realized I was taught wrong. I was basing all my stuff on 20 years of doing it the wrong way.
Right.
I was just talking to somebody last night, there's think of a cake, right? It's got multiple layers. The bottom layer is the code. That's electrical code. You have to do that. You don't have a choice in the matter. It's for safety, minimum quality construction. The next layer up is going to be the standards, right? Like the ANSI standards, the 606, 607, the 516.1.2.3, all them standards. The next up above that is going to be the best practice manuals, for example, like the TDMM sitting back there, or the ITSM manual. And can you follow all 3? Yes. Can you follow just the codes if you want to? Yes. Another way to start an argument on the internet. Put a picture up there and let somebody critique it, and they say, yeah, but it meets code. Minimum quality of construction.
Right.
Do you want to be known as a technician who does minimum quality? Probably not.
Right.
And knowing the people who probably follow this podcast and the circles you run in, I guarantee you they don't want to be known as the companies that do minimum quality. So you can always exceed code. So follow the best practice manuals because they were written by industry professionals who have decades of experience, who are telling you the most efficient way, the most reliable way to install cable plant that's going to cause you the least amount of headaches. And Dad always said, the best lesson learned is from somebody else's mistake.
Right. Right. So how long did it take you to get your RCDD?
6 months.
6 months.
6 months.
That after failing it the first time, in addition to that, was 6 months?
No. Beginning to end. 6 months.
Okay.
But I know some people who got it literally in a couple of weeks. I know some people it took them years. That everybody's RCDD journey is different.
Okay.
Everybody learns differently. Everybody learns at different rates. Because the current edition, the 15th edition, has 2,200 pages in it. It's got 22 chapters, and there's a lot of information in that book that people read and go, "Oh my gosh, I got to know all this." You do to get past the test, right? But it's a journey, and that's why I never look down on anybody who says, "Oh, it took me 2 years," because it, I'm when I fail at something, I come back at it twice as hard. That's what happened to me, right?
Right.
When I got that phone call that I failed it, I first thing I did is I called them back up because this is back, the web wasn't really around yet. We were still kind of being developed yet. So I called them back up and said, "When's the next test they're going to conduct in the Northeast?" And they said, "Well, we got one happening in Charlotte in about 6 weeks." I said, "Schedule me."
Mm-hmm.
And I picked that date, and I buried myself back in the book again. And the funny thing was, when I took the test the first time, I felt good. I thought, "Man, I nailed it. I passed it." And then I got, no, you didn't. And then the second time when I got the phone call, I was positive that I failed the test.
Right.
I was positive I failed the test. And then so when I got the actual phone call, I actually said to him, I'm like, "Okay, Chuck Bowser, right? Remember blah, 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 blah. Yeah, that's you." I was like, I didn't believe them when they told me I passed it because I really thought I'd failed it. So it's a different journey for everybody. I will tell you this, that if you are considering, get it, pursue your RCD, because it's a career changer. It's a game changer. It's going to open up doors for customers and jobs. And there's a ton, you will make 10-fold, 100-fold more than without it. Can you go through your entire career without having an RCDD? Yes. But you gain peer recognition. You get opportunities to do bid work where they require RCDDs, and everybody's journey is a little bit different. So I highly suggest do it. Don't procrastinate, because they're already talking about revising the TDM into the 16th edition. And every time they revise it, they add more pages. It never gets skinnier. It always gets thicker.
Well, it's over the years, it's more and more information and revisions. So it's probably going to be 10,000 pages sooner or later. But and you hit the nail on the head for aspiring RCDDs, people looking to do it, go ahead and do it. Now, is that a lifetime certificate, or is it something you have to brush up on annually?
So once you get your RCDD, every 3 years you have to get continuing education credits. You have to attend classes. The classes can be, for example, like those webinars I mentioned on Cable Installation Maintenance Magazine. A lot of the manufacturers have CECs. Let's Talk Cabling has 4 classes recognized for CECs. You can go to events like Tech Fest, right? Because we're currently trying to get that one recognized for CECs.
Right.
And you can go to Bixie conferences. So it's a lot easier to get CECs nowadays than it was when I first got my RCD, because the only way you can get them was to actually physically go to a class and sit down. But now with webinars and virtual training and all this stuff, if you didn't get enough CECs, dude, you aren't trying hard enough. That's all I'm going to say.
Right. Now, I've had the pleasure of sitting in on some of your trainings and classes. When the first ever Tech Fest, you gave a really good class on fire stopping and the importance of fire stopping, and why most people ignore it when they shouldn't.
Right.
So
one of the common comments I hear quite often is, and I see this quite often after sits in a class, is like, "Man, Chuck made me afraid to do fire stopping now."
Right. Yeah. So, what other classes do you teach people, and how can they be a part of that?
So the class I have recognized are bonding and grounding, CCA, fire stopping, and what's the fourth one? I can't remember the fourth one off the top of my head. It's on my website. Go to letstalkcabling.com. You'll find it there.
Okay.
And then I'd also do training for my day job, but you have to be in the program. That's not open to the general public. You have to be in the program to get to that training.
Okay. So, what are some of the most common mistakes that you see from low voltage techs?
Lack of attention to detail.
Okay.
Because that's going to cause you problems over everything. I'll just give you one example of many. When you terminate a cable on a APHC, the standard tells us you can't untwist more than 1/2 of an inch, right? And a lot of times I'll see people just stripping the jacket back and then having way too much untwist. It's that attention to detail, paying attention to what the scope of work says to do or what the best practice says to do, and following it to the T. And that'll help you be successful, whether you're doing copper, whether you're doing fiber, whether you're doing project management. That the biggest thing is attention to detail, because there's an old saying in the gun world, and I can never remember it correctly, but slow is smooth, smooth is fast. That's it. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Meaning, when you start doing something the first time, don't try to be super fast at it. Just keep doing it, build up the muscle memory, and when you do it enough times, speed will come.
Right.
Don't try to break the world record on your very first jack, because you're going to mess up. And realize that you will mess up. You know, in the because I was an estimator for quite a number of years, and there's an error rate to human production, meaning, and it's about 3%. Meaning, if I give you 100 jacks, 3 of them will be done wrong, and not because you're horrible, but because we are human beings. We're easily distracted. We have ADHD. Your phone rings, or you go to lunch, you come back, or you get the notification from TikTok or whatever, and
right.
We make mistakes. It happens. Just understand it was wrong and how to fix it. And I always tell people, it's not a mistake until you test it with a tester.
Right. and that I think that's the importance of having a certifier with you or a tester with you, because of that 3% human error, where you could be the best in the industry, but you're not going to be perfect. So
that's another argument. That's another argument on the internet. Get on there and say, I think you should certify every drop. You will start an argument. We don't certify. Certifiers are stupidly expensive. Yeah, they are.
But they're worth it.
They're worth it. It's kind of like divorces, right? Why are they so expensive? Because they're worth it.
Right. So what key skill would you say a new technician coming into this industry needs to learn in order to be successful?
2.
Okay.
I got 2. 1, show up consistently. And the second one, have an open mind, right? It's okay to challenge. Like if your foreman or your supervisor telling you to do something a certain way, and you think you might have a better, it's okay to challenge that. But if the foreman comes back and says, look, we have to do it this way because this is the way the best practice tells us to do, or the standards tells us to do, or this is the customer has us to do it, right? So have an open mind and be willing to learn, because nothing's more scary to me than when somebody comes up to me and says, oh, I know everything about low voltage. Really? I've got 42 years experience, and I'll be the first to tell you, I don't know everything about low voltage.
Right. You may know a lot,
but I don't know everything.
Right.
I don't know everything.
I know a little about a lot. I don't know everything.
And for those things I don't know, I have. Here's the third one for you. Third one, network. Okay. Network with people. Go to events. Go to Tech Fest. Go to the Big C conferences. Network with people. Create friends. Build relationships, because you never know. Somebody might ask you a question on like, for example, broadband fiber optic network. Yeah, you know how much I know about broadband fiber optic network? About as much as I can stuff into this cup.
Right.
That's about how much I know about broadband fiber optic networks.
Okay.
But I know people who do it. I know people who teach it.
Yeah.
So there you go. Network. So network, continuous learner, and show up.
Okay. Now, earlier in the show, we talked about how there's not enough people in the workforce to keep up with the demand that we're seeing. Yep. So how can the industry, or how can business owners attract and retain the younger talent needed for the demand that we're seeing?
Oof, that's a whole entire show right there. Holy smokes, that's a whole entire show. So here's the thing. In order to answer this question, you have to go at it with a hunting rifle, not a shotgun, right?
Right.
And what I mean by that is, because I can't broad brush a response here, because it would apply for some people, not others. And what I mean by that is, I'll give you one example. Take care of your employees. Make them feel valued. Everybody has different motivations why they go to work. Some people want to make money, a lot of money. Some people want recognition. Some people just want that, good job, man. There's a pat on the back, right? Everybody's got different motivations. Understand what motivates your employees. And some of the companies in the low voltage industry subscribe to the old school management theories of, look, just do what I tell you to do. Shut up. And, I'll tell you when you need to know. You want to empower your employees.
Yeah, I've seen it. when business owners or managers have that mindset, I've seen it
Yeah.
countless times where they'll stay just long enough to learn, and then they say, "Okay, I'm gonna go do this on my own now. I don't need you anymore."
Right.
Yeah,
And, and that's why I said I can't paint with a broad brush, because there's many people in the same circles you and I run in
right.
that have their own companies. They're the exact opposite of that. They
Mhm.
value their employees. They train their employees. They make employees feel like that's why I said I can't paint with a broad brush, because there are those that do that. What happens is, to the companies that do those kinds of bad behaviors, is they're shooting themselves in the foot. When you look at American companies, when they're doing their forecasting, they look 12 months down the road, 24 months down the road, 36 months down the road. The Japanese, they look 10 years down the road,
Mhm.
15 years down the road. They think long game, not short game. So when you have a company that's doing those stupid kinds of things, like just do what I tell you to do, I'm not going to teach you, you don't need to know that. What happened? You hit it nail on the head. Those employees, they're going to leave the company. They're going to go find somewhere else that does appreciate them. And what a lot of companies don't realize is, and the number changes depending on the level of the person, right? A project manager is going to be more than an apprentice, but there's a significant dollar value that a company has to lay out when they hire somebody new, either if they have experience or don't have experience, because you got to teach them your way of doing things. You got to figure out, and it takes that employee. They don't hit the ground running at 100% on day one. They're gonna hold back a little bit to try to learn how everything's done within the company. That all costs the company money. And if you're replacing somebody, every 6 months, 8 months, because you're treating them like dirt, you're not seeing the long run, and you're shooting yourself in the foot.
Right. Right. That's. I always look because we spoke on it there for briefly for a second, but people that go out on their own because the opposite end of the spectrum of
Yep.
uh, they weren't treated exactly the way that
Right.
they needed or wanted to be treated, so they learn just enough to go out on their own, and then they become their old boss's competition. I've seen that a lot in the industry.
Yep.
Um, but let's pivot and change focus here for a second, uh, because I wanted to talk about any overlaps that surprising, whether it's technology based or whether it's mindset based, any overlaps that you've seen between your personal farm and the low voltage industry. Anything that you've seen where it kind of overlaps.
Yeah, you would think they're two totally separate things, the farm and the low voltage stuff, but they're not. There's a lot of stuff. Work ethic,
Right.
getting up and showing to work. Because the funny thing is about owning a farm, the goats don't care if it's raining or snowing outside. They still need to be let out. They still need to be fed. You got to get up. You got to do the job. It's not always. That's why it cracks me up when you see the homestead channels where they show you them outside doing the farm chores, and it's a beautiful 75-degree day, and it's not. No. I've been out there doing it in a hurricane. I've been out there doing it in rain. I've been out there in freezing temperatures.
Blistering heat.
Blistering heat. More blistering heat than anything else, right?
Right.
Right. So, one thing about owning a farm is it really taught me tenacity and keep going. And another thing too is, and a lot of people don't realize this is, from owning a farm, a lot of people, they think it's easy, and sometimes some days are easy, but the vast majority are not. But what I've learned is how some of my own decisions help me achieve a goal or have hindered me from getting to a goal. So now I kind of put everything through that filter, right? I'll give you an example. So a farm, right? Yeah, you want to grow gardens. Yes, you want to have chickens, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you want to have a closed system. So you want to, in order to grow plants, you have to have good soil. You're not going to grow plants. Florida, we have Mayaca sand. The ground's horrible here. You have to have good soil to grow in. Well, okay, I can either pay a dump truck to, $1,200 to dump off, 8 square yards of potting soil, which is not cheap, or I can grow my own soil. Right. So you got to learn how to think outside the box and okay. So my decision is, if I want to have a closed loop system, my aquaponics system. So I got an aquaponics system. I probably got 100 tilapia in there right now. Every week I can extract out of that system 5 gallons of fish emulsion. 5 gallons of fish emulsion. If you go to Lowe's, fish emulsion is a great fertilizer for gardens. If you go to Lowe's and buy just one of the little bottles, about yay big, it's about 12 ounces. It's about $15. I get 5 gallons a week for
Okay.
free. So,
Right.
so my decision to have that has helped me achieve other goals. So same thing with low voltage, right? You talked about the RCDD. My decision to pursue my RCDD, yes, I could have gone my entire 42 and a half year career and not had it, but because I made the decision to go get that credential, I mean, immediately within a week, the company I was working for offered me $25,000 more a year. That was an immediate response right there.
Right.
And then I started getting chased by a bunch of people. Hey, how happy are you working there? Come here. I always turn them down because I'm not one of those people who works for money.
Right.
I work because I love building things. I love watching things being built and stuff like that. And I just had a call just today. Somebody, oh yeah, Chuck, we came across your resume on one of the job websites. I'm like, what? I haven't. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
And they go, do you still work for Moztec? I'm like, that's 3 companies ago. I said, how old is that resume? I said, no. But so having that credential is still paying off with job opportunities, right? And because I have my credential, it obviously raises the customer's perception of me. It also raises my, I start doing, volunteer work on committees stuff. So now I am networking. One of the 3 things I told you about earlier, networking.
Right.
I'm running in circles with people who are way smarter than me. So I'm always learning from them. So my decision to pursue that RCDD has reaped multiple benefits, just like, growing my own soil has reaped multiple benefits on the farm.
Yeah. Now you mentioned networking. I want to get your thoughts on why industry events like TechFest are critical to people in the industry and networking in general.
Lots of reasons. The number one reason and it's going to be different for everybody else, but the number one reason for me is networking. I love meeting with, hanging out with, breaking bread with people who think the same as me. And I'm not saying, people or one gender or another gender or one color. I'm talking about people who know what it's like when you go to pull a cable through a conduit, you attach it to the pull string, and that pull string is all wrapped up inside, I think, as the person did before he didn't do it right. Right. There's a huge value there, right? Because you get to meet people and all that stuff. And then also, because most people are doing their daily job, they're estimating projects every day, they're project managing jobs every day, they're actually installing the cable and terminating the copper and the fiber. They don't have time to sit down and say, okay, well, let's go watch this webinar tonight. When you go to an event like TechFest or you go to a conference like the Big C conference, right? Then you can disconnect from all that noise and hyper focus for just 1 week or a couple of days on that event and come away knowing more than you did when you went there, and knowing more people than you when you went there.
Absolutely. And it'll be the 3rd annual Tech Fest, but the 2nd time in Nashville. Now, what or who are you most excited about for Tech Fest 2025? Because for me this year, it's focused a lot more on educating and uh, engaging with people outside of the TKW community and teaching people how important this industry is. So, what are you most excited about for this year?
I'm just excited, period. I don't know if I could pick one thing out of that,
Right.
because I love going to those kinds of events. I love meeting people. I love getting to see all the new stuff and sitting all the trainings. I'm kind of interested to hear Kevlin's presentation on networking.
Are you familiar with Kevlin?
Oh yeah, I know Kevlin. Yeah, we go back.
Okay.
She's been on the podcast several times, and I've been to the Women in Bixie conferences or Women in Bixie event stuff, and so yeah, we know each other very well.
Okay.
So I'm real interested because she has a different perspective on networking than I do, and I'm always willing to open my parachute. Mine's like a parachute; it only functions when it's open, right? So I'm really interested to sit down and see what she says about networking, her perspectives, and how she uses it to see if there's something I can glean from that to make me better at networking. So I'm excited for the whole entire event because matter of fact, I need to buy the plane ticket for it. I keep forgetting to do that. I got to put it down. If it's not on my to-do list, I'm writing it down right now. Buy plane ticket.
Yeah, I think I've done everything except the plane ticket. I've booked the hotel. I've gotten the attendee tickets. I've gotten everything except the plane ticket.
Yep.
But why, for people that are new to this industry or have never attended an event before, TechFest is a good entry event or a
Yeah.
good leeway event into
Yeah.
those bigger events that you see. So why should installers, contractors, and other professionals come to TechFest?
For somebody new coming into the industry, I think going to a Tech Fest event first before you go to a Bixie event would help you tenfold because so Tech Fest you're gonna come across a couple hundred people, right?
Mhm.
So you can plug in easier and talk to it's easy to talk to people. When you go to a Bixie event, there's 3,000 people there, 5,000 people, so you can kind of feel left out, disconnected, or unless you really know how to apply yourself or have good networking skills. When I say
Right.
networking skills,
Yeah.
I don't mean cable and equipment. I'm talking about talking to people.
Yeah.
How do you start a conversation with somebody, right? I could do a whole show on that. How do you start a conversation with somebody you don't even know, right? So those people are kind of afraid of going to a Bixie conference. Maybe start off with a Tech Fest because it's going to be smaller, more intimate, and people. When we go to a Bixie conference, again, there's 5,000 people. Everybody's got their own. I got to go to the exhibit hall. I got to get this done. I get that done.
Yeah.
For me, the Tech Fest events, and I've been to 2 so far. This will be my 3rd, just coming up this year.
Right.
It seems like going back and visiting with family again. You already start
Almost,
off
yeah.
knowing each other. You already
Yeah.
start off knowing each other.
Mhm. Okay. So, and we're kind of staying in the TechFest realm here, because with it being at the end of April, it's coming up quick. I always kind of want to remind people on these episodes the importance of attending TechFest.
Yep.
I know people can, if you go to techfest.org, the listeners here, you guys can see all the speakers, the keynote speakers, the skills challenges, the sponsors, the exhibitors, everything about TechFest you can find on techfest.org. Uh, if you're on the fence about it, like Chuck just said, it's definitely an event that will help you tenfold, especially if you're new to the industry. Um, but when you go to TechFest, you get hands-on with a lot of the products and get to speak face to face with the people who are making those products. Have you seen a favorite tool and you're like, that's pretty cool. I wish I had that when I was installing cable. Is there a tool that pops out in your mind where you're like, that's pretty cool?
Okay, so yes, fusion splicers. Fusion splicers.
Okay.
So when I was a young guy and I was terminating fiber in 3 feet of snow, when we terminated fiber, the most common type of fiber optic connector was what's called anaerobic fiber. So
Mhm.
there's a 2-part epoxy. You had to strip the fiber. You had to load the connector with epoxy. You had to put a hardener on the fiber. You had to put it through. Then you had to take a ruby scribe. You had to scribe the fiber, and then you had to polish it. You had to polish it on
Mhm.
3 different lapping films. Right? It was
Mhm.
almost an art. Almost an art. And so the first machine that I dealt with was this big old machine, had 2 big old discs on it, and you put the fiber on one and polish it for a little while, and you put it on the other one. But it literally took 15 minutes to
Mhm.
do one connector. Fusion splicing now, I could probably take. My grandson was just here last weekend, and I got a fusion splicer that got sent to me. I get to play with it for a short period of time. I probably could have unboxed it and taught him how to fusion splice in a matter of 5 minutes, and have him fusion splicing as good as 80% of the people out there doing fusion splicing right now.
Yeah, it's come a long way, and
Mm-hmm.
there's so many different fusion splicers out there, but ultimately they're all getting you to the same endpoint.
Mm-hmm.
But fusion splicing has definitely changed the game as far as being able
Oh
to
yes,
terminate fiber.
absolutely.
My favorite tool would probably be, and it's something as simple as like a door jam or a
Oh,
pulling
those are
pal.
cool.
Yeah,
Because more than once I would use electrical tape and wrap it
right.
around the thing. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
something that simple you wouldn't think would be that big of a help on the job site, but the door jam to help you from getting locked in or out of a room that you needed access to, or the pulling pal, just an
Yep.
extra set of hands to pull
Hey,
cable
hey,
through a ceiling.
can I plug a future episode of Let's Talk Cabling?
Go ahead.
So I just did a show. It's going to come out on Monday 3/7, right? Monday 3/7. I talked to an inventor who invented this thing called the Omni Shelf.
Okay.
Omni Shelf.
Okay.
So you might want to watch that episode. We'll talk a little bit about how the process got there, but we're going to talk about the way you can use it. And so the cool thing is, it's got magnets on it, so you can stick it to a piece of metal, and you can use it as a shelf to terminate stuff. You can use it as a shelf to hold your computer when you're doing it's future episode.
Okay. So what we talked about best advice for new techs. We talked about your favorite tool. We've talked about a lot this episode. But I want to talk about common misconceptions in the low voltage industry, where someone will say something and you'll go, actually.
So, the funny thing is I try not to do that because, and this comes from being, I guess what makes me an okay trainer is I used to be a QA inspector beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
And as a QA inspector, I learned pretty quickly when you go in and you look at a job, as a QA inspector, you can always find something wrong about a job. Always.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I learned pretty quickly that if you went in and you start saying, you did this wrong, you did that wrong, you did that wrong, they shut down and don't even listen to you.
Right.
They shut down because you're talking about their baby. That's their pride and joy. Well, for most technicians, it's their pride and joy. Right. Like maybe like a Pierce when you look at his stuff online, right? It's a pride and joy. So you're talking about somebody's baby, and
Mm-hmm.
they shut down. So what I quickly learned as a QA inspector was, okay, instead of beating them up right about, say, okay, man, you did this really well. I love the way you did that. I love the way you did this. You did that really good. Hey, there's some things I see that we need to improve on future installs.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to always approach my QA inspection as a learning opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And so then when that transitions to being a trainer, it's when somebody says, hey, they say something. At first, I try to assess: do they really want to learn, or because you and I both know there's people out there that they've been doing it the same way for 20 plus years, and you could tell them the sky is blue, and they will still argue with you.
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
I'm not going to waste my time on those type of people.
Mm-hmm.
But if I know you because I've dealt with you before or we're friends or whatever, and I know that just from dealing with you like to learn, I would say, hey, that's not really the way you're supposed to do that. Here's the way you're supposed to do that. Here's why you should be doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably how I'd answer that question.
Okay. Now we're coming up on the hour here for the end of the episode, but a couple episodes back, I asked Vertical Cable what superpower would help you install cable faster or better or more conveniently. If you could have any superpower to help you on the job site.
What did they say first? What did they say?
They said, initially they said X-ray vision, so that they could see through the walls and see how to pull the cable. And then I kind of made them change their mind, and they chose telekinesis, to be able to pull cable through the wall without wearing your body down. Just sit there and look at it.
Right.
So it was between X-ray vision and telekinesis.
Gotcha.
But if you had to choose, what would you say?
So my biggest thing that causes me to stumble is my ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I tend to, I'm result oriented, and I want to get done right now, and sometimes that hasn't worked out so well for me, and sometimes I've forgotten things because of my ADHD. So calm mind would be my superpower, because if I've got a calm mind, I can see things through and figure out how to do it quickly and easily. I don't need X-ray vision because I know how to fish a wall. I don't need I don't need super strength because I already have blue steel muscles. I'm okay with all that. I don't go to a gym. I have a farm. I'm always doing something. So just calm my mind. That would be, if I could calm my mind, I could think through things a lot easier and long term and be better at things.
Yeah. I generally have a calm mind. So being able to have a calm mind is a superpower. Because in situations, my wife's the worrier. She worries about everything, and I'm always
must be related to my wife.
I'm always calm, and she's like, "Why aren't you more worried about this?" And I'm like, I'm calm because I'm thinking of a solution.
Right.
So, being able to have a calm mind on the job site, still telekinesis, I think, takes the cake. Because I get
Because then you could be eating your bologna sandwich,
right,
and making the cable pull itself in.
Yeah,
I get that. But there's also some satisfaction when you do it yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get that. Okay. Well, Chuck, I appreciate you hopping on the podcast today, buddy. It's been a blast getting to know a little bit about you, your history in the industry, and how you got where you are today. You're definitely an inspiration to a lot of people, and I truly appreciate you hopping on today.
My pleasure. I appreciate you inviting me on and giving me a chance to talk with Theron again.
I know we've been trying to make something help the stars align to get us on one of our podcasts, but I'm glad we are able to get something worked out here and get you on. I appreciate it, buddy.
Thank you.
Yeah.